my hands like this, Bjorn, you're going to have to take over. I'm not sure what I've done here.
Okay.
After all these years of an online sangha Myoshin, still the internet remains a koan sometimes.
Indeed, it does.
Let me know when we're ready, Bjorn.
Oh, we're good to go.
Oh, lovely. Well, thank you, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. It is lovely to have you here. This is another meeting of our Tree Leaf series from the wonderful book Zen Teachings in Challenging Times. Our guest today, we are honored to have Myoshin Kate McCandless, who is coming to us from Vancouver, where she is one of the guiding teachers and founder of the Mountain Rain Zen Community. Her theme today, we're very honored to have her, particularly with all that's going on in the news once again, of all the sadness and difficulties, violence and war that is so disheartening to so many of us. Myoshin has a wonderful essay in that book on what I call a Bodhisattva burnout, and something many of us feel, I think, when the compassion, the caring, the wanting to do something gets to be so much. So first off, I would just like to say, Myoshin, thank you for being here. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you
Lovely.
for inviting.
And we're going to sit Zazen for a moment, but Jim, before we do, and then I'm going to turn things over to you. But before I do, I'm coming to you from Tsukuba, Japan, which I believe used to be your old stomping ground. Is that correct?
Yes. Not only did I stomp on that ground, I began Zen practice on Mount Tsukuba. Very close to 40 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, I thought I had a monopoly on crazy Zen foreigners in Tsukuba, and now I found out I have a great senpai, a great predecessor here. Were you at Tsukuba University?
Yes, from about 1983 to 85.
Was that during the expo?
No, it was right after.
Oh, okay.
It was right
What
after.
What were you studying at Tsukuba University, if I may ask?
I was studying Japanese poetry.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Well, you're welcome back here anytime. But if we may, Myoshin, Bjorn, would you ring the bell just for a moment, and we will have a couple of minutes of zazen. Lovely. And without further protocol, I would like to turn everything over to Myoshin and just say thank you again, Myoshin. We all need this talk, I think. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jundo, and thank you everyone for coming. Good morning or afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. Maybe the middle of the night for some. I'd be curious just to know where people are. I'd like to get a sense of you all. So maybe just raise your hand if you're in Japan. Okay, so that clears that up. How many are in North America? Let's see, almost everybody. And how many are in Europe? And is there anyone anywhere else? Okay, that gives me a pretty good idea. And how many are on the West Coast or the West side of North America, as I am, in the same time zone? Okay, and how many on the East side and Central? Yeah, okay, so we're spread all over the continent and beyond. It's a chilly, wet day here in the Pacific Northwest. It's very characteristic this day. So it's a good day to be indoors and warm. Our Sangha, like so many, has become a hybrid online and in-person Sangha. As you know, worldwide, so many more people have been linked virtually through the wonders and trials of Zoom and social media, other media. Over these years that we have become more physically isolated and less embodied in our practice, in our connections, in our Sangha practice. Zoom has been a mixed blessing in our Sangha. It's brought our long distance members closer so that when they do come to attend sesshin, they are warmly recognized and greeted, and they too know people's names. And there have been some of those funny Zoom acquaintance surprises. Oh, you're much taller than I thought you were, right? On the other hand, after 3 years of primarily online meetings, and this is not just true of our Sangha, but other Sanghas I've heard about, workplaces, even families, I think people's, what I'm calling interpersonal fluency, has atrophied a bit. Notice that I refrained from saying interpersonal skills, which is a commonly used phrase. And it's true that there are skills we can learn, interpersonal skills, but it's more than that. There's that sense of trust and ease that comes with proximity, being in each other's physical company, sharing tea and cookies. We miss the tea and cookies all those months. That buffer zone that eases human relationships and all the little stories of the joys and sorrows of everyday life when we take time to just be with each other. That's what weakened, I think. That's what weakened as the strain and anxiety and frustration of the pandemic months and years went on and on. I think people became a little more thin-skinned, perhaps a little more easily threatened, feeling and more apt to take positions rather than deeply listen to a different point of view. And I think we're still in recovery collectively from that effect. So I believe that our post-pandemic, if we can call it that, recovery is not a matter of get back to normal as quickly as possible, but of an extended period of relational rehab. We really need to look at what is still deeply wounded in our hearts, in our families, in our communities, ecosystems, and in our world. So that's where I feel like the story of Vimalakirti, that ancient enlightened layman of the Buddha's time, legendary, that story still is as relevant as ever, as relevant as I wrote it in that essay 6 or 7 years ago, and as it has been for ages. Now, I'd like to get a sense of how many people have actually have read the essay. Please don't be embarrassed if you haven't. Looks like half or so. That's because I want to know whether I should read a few passages. And I think perhaps I should, if those of you who've already read it don't mind. This essay begins with an account of a walk through Kyoto in 2016, when my partner in Dharma and in life, Shinmon Michael Newton, and I guided a group of about 20 Zen students in a kind of pilgrimage around parts of Japan. This was the third time that we had done such a tour. And we had lived in Kyoto. We moved from the university at Tsukuba to Kyoto, and we had practiced there. We had practiced with a teacher named Okumura Shohaku Roshi, who is now in Bloomington, Indiana, and known for his wonderful work translating Dogen. I'm sure some of you are familiar with his work and some of his own writing, particularly Realizing Genjo Koan is one I would, and Living by Vow. Those are two that I really would recommend of his work. So we had the great privilege of practicing with him before he was known, when he was still quite young, and we were young. And that was, I will be forever grateful for that introduction to Soto Zen practice. We returned to Vancouver in 1987 and began to practice with our teacher, Zoketsu Norman Fischer, who is a writer and poet. And some of you may have read his writing in various periodicals and books. So just wanted to give that little bit of background. So in 2016, we were in Kyoto, and this is what I wrote. Before the group arrived, we spent 2 days wandering the narrow back streets of Kyoto, attending an annual international photography festival called Kyotography. The 15 venues, from ultra-modern galleries to ancient Zen temples to beautiful old machiya, traditional merchant homes, added ambience to the exhibitions. The theme for the 2016 festival was Circle of Life. Quoting from the catalog, "A circle is the ultimate system, the perfect emblem, tracing the birth, life, and death of all nature's creations. Everything connects, intersecting, expanding, creating powerful patterns, showing us the fragility and beauty of our existence. The images still haunt me, stir me, and worry me. I invite you to come with us." Plankton, a microscopic aquatic world of floating, drifting life forms. Bacteria, algae, archaea, protozoa, tiny jellies, and crustacean larvae. In the enlarged backlit photos of Christian Sardet at the Kyoto Municipal Museum, they are stunningly beautiful, spined, filamentous, segmented, diaphanous, iridescent. Plankton provide food directly for sea creatures, from other planktonic forms to the largest beings on Earth, the great blue whales, and indirectly to many forms of fish, sea mammals, birds, and humans. Phytoplankton one-celled plants capable of photosynthesis produce half of the oxygen we breathe. Like the great forests, they serve as the lungs of the earth. Plankton are in trouble. They multiply or bloom in cycles dependent on an intricate balance of conditions, including water temperature and acidity. As carbon dioxide levels rise in the oceans, acidity falls, causing some types of plankton to be unable to form their calcium shells and others to produce unviable eggs. If plankton populations crash or blooms occur in new locations or at altered times, the entire food chain is affected. Albatrosses are in trouble too. The next Kyotography venue we find is the Kondaya Genbei Kurogura, a black storehouse in the rear of the premises of a 10th generation obi merchant. Obis, of course, are the kimono sash, traditional kimono sash. The storehouse is plastered in black mortar, beautifully restored as a gallery space. Walking down the dark entrance hall, we see portrait after portrait of albatross chick corpses lying in the sand of the Pacific island of Midway. At the center of each desiccated body, a jumble of multicolored plastic flotsam, bottle caps, string, fragments, ringed by matted feathers, beaks, and bones. The parent birds skimmed the plastic junk from the surface of the ocean and fed their chicks till their stomachs could hold no more, and they died of starvation. The photographer, Chris Jordan, was drawn to Midway to make a pilgrimage of witness. He writes, "I see it as a message, like a kind of poem, coming from Earth herself, a message that is not easy to receive, because it is so shocking and sad. As we walk down the hallway, stopping before each portrait, tears stream down my face. This is a whole body, mind, heart response." Albatrosses are long-lived. They are slow breeders, producing only one chick annually or biennially, and not beginning to breed until they are 3 to 4 or even as old as 15. They are severely threatened by entanglement in fishing lines, invasive species, oil spills, and plastic debris. Of the 22 species of albatrosses in the world, 8 are classified by the International Union for Conservation of Nature as critically endangered or endangered, and the rest as vulnerable or near threatened. We step into the round body of the storehouse, darkened except for the glowing lamps created by designer and artist Jürgen Lehl, who lived for 40 years on the Okinawan island of Ishigaki. He made these lamps of plastic debris found on his daily beach walks. I'm going to skip ahead. There's a long quote by him. These lamps or sculptures were strikingly beautiful, made out of plastic beach junk. Jürgen Lehl died on September 23rd, 2014, in an accident on the island he loved. The lamps glowing in the black storehouse are remarkably suggestive of plankton drifting in the dark seas. Plastic does not biodegrade. It only breaks down into smaller and smaller particles. Scientists do not yet know the consequences of plankton ingesting these infinitesimal particles of plastic. We humans have only been using plastic since the 1950s, and yet by 2014, international scientists determined that 5.25 trillion particles of plastic smog, surface pollution, pollute our oceans worldwide. It is carried on ocean currents, accumulating in 5 massive gyres and dispersing like smoke in the air. Today, scientists scramble to research the effects of plastic pollution on marine ecosystems, and NGOs strive to mitigate and halt the damage. There are those who say, what's all this concern about albatrosses? Don't you care about humans? Some species just can't compete. Survival of the fittest. That's the way evolution works. And plankton will adapt. They've been around for millions of years. Or we'll engineer microbes that can digest plastics. Don't worry. But these images bring the message home. Our fate is not separate from the fate of plankton and albatrosses. Continuing along the narrow streets of Kyoto, we come to the Mumeisha, a 107-year-old former fabric merchant's machiya residence. We remove our shoes in the stone-paved entryway and step up into the former showroom. The exhibit here is called Exile, 1945 to today. The work of photographers from Magnum, the world's most prestigious photographic agency. One of the photographers, Larry Toll, writes, "Land makes people what they are. Of that I am sure. If they lose it, they forfeit their solvency and a little bit of their souls, which they will spend the rest of their lives trying to regain." We pass the courtyard garden and into the dimly lit residential wing, a long tatami-floored room opening onto the inner garden at one end, flanked by shoji screens. Down the middle of the room is a long, narrow platform with black, reflective plexiglass sides. The upper surface is lit from below, illuminating photos mounted on wood blocks of different sizes, each bearing an image of displaced men, women, and children in locations all over the world, from every decade since World War II. As you move slowly through the exhibit, pick up each block with both hands as though holding a precious tea bowl, or as though you were a helpless god, witnessing the consequences of human greed, hatred, and ignorance. Look carefully, feeling your breath, your body, your response. Then turn the block around to read the caption, the year, the place, the people. Syrians, French, Germans, Palestinians, Ethiopians, Guatemalans, men, women, the very young, the very old. Raise each block up with a silent prayer before placing it back. It's becoming more and more evident that climate change and ecological disruption contribute to political, economic, and social instability. The fate of plankton and albatrosses is not separate from that of displaced people. Look carefully with unaverted eyes, says the exhibit. They are not somewhere far off beyond our realm of concern. They are our reality as well. We continue zigzagging through the back streets of Kyoto, arriving on a wide thoroughfare at the Horikawa Oike Gallery, part of the public facility supporting school arts programs. The show is called The First Hour by French photographer Thierry Bouet. We enter through a narrow aperture into a large white circular room surrounded by larger-than-life-sized images of faces of infants within minutes of their birth. They look a little mashed and wrinkled, with traces of vernix, that waxy substance that protects the skin in the womb and lubricates the baby as it passes through the birth canal. They are so newly alive. I wonder what kind of world this will be when they are my age. I can't help but worry about them. So much has happened since 2016. It's not that long ago, and yet it seems almost as though we were more innocent then. I don't think you need me to give you a list of the concerns. But I'd like to just take a moment and pause in this talk and ask you, what are some of the deepest concerns that you hold in your hearts after the recent years that we've lived through? Just raise your hand and I'll call on you to speak. Onki, please. Of course, you need to unmute.
There we go. Sorry, I couldn't find the button.
Yeah.
I really worry about war and hatred in the world.
Yes, thank you. And I'm sure wherever you are, the concern of the rising level of hatred that the war in the Middle East has generated is strong in our hearts. Mark, please.
My concern is with everything that's going on, us as human beings and our capacity to, even in solutions, have egos that want to be, and I work in the environmental, activism, and it's heartbreaking because there's a whole lot of struggle to be at the front of the parade or to be the one banging the drum at the front of the parade. There tends to forget just what the parade is about. And that's my biggest heartbreaking thing, is seeing all the struggle and conflict within certain environmental movements.
Yes, that's definitely painful to witness, and one wishes that environmental activism could be grounded in our practice. Anybody else like to speak? Beyond, please.
I'm going to bring it to a smaller scale just for a second. Not the big issues, but one of the things that I noticed the most is, and it troubles me, that I feel we've lost interest in each other. We've lost the capacity to focus on something else that's not just us. I don't know if it's, technology, if it's social media, if it's what it is, but we've become self-centered because everything that's given to us is a platform for us. So we don't show interest in the others. We don't want to belong. We don't want to be a part of a group of people and work with others. It's sort of me, continuously.
Yeah, I think that's what I was talking about with that. That's erosion of relational fluency, and we could, of course, do a complex analysis of that, but it leads to loneliness and paralysis, doesn't it? Yeah. So that's an example of how these concerns are like nested within each other, from the smallest to the largest. Yeah. Anybody else? Doshin, please.
I'm going to take Mark's comments and go a little bit bigger. For the last half century, my concern and focus has been on the degradation of the world health issues in the environment. And you touched upon it. Everything, plankton is a source that comes to us. Everything we do to the environment affects us eventually. And we're beginning to see the collapse of ecosystems as they degrade it and biodiversity is lost. And those all lead to everything from wars to all these other problems that we have economic. So that has been a continuing issue. And I think more and more people realize that as time has gone on.
Yes, thank you. From the Canadian perspective, Canadians tend to be, on the whole, rather privileged and somewhat complacent but the worst fire season ever has been a wake-up call for many up here. The boreal forests burning so terribly, and boreal forests do not recover quickly at all, in the far north. So, yes. I think I saw Nico and then Toker. Nico.
I think a lot about justice and responsibility, and it's all the environment is part of it. I worry a great deal about what we're doing to the environment, to ourselves, to other animals, and so and it just all, I think it's all connected, and maybe it is that self-centeredness that Bjorn referenced, because it's the environment, it's justice and how we treat other people, how the divisions that have grown, especially in the US, between sides, it's just mind-boggling to me that we're so far apart that we can't even agree on things like science. So, and I just think that's all connected. It's always on my mind more than this. Thanks.
Thank you. Toker, you ready to
Yeah,
go?
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I was she said division, and that was my concern. It just seems like, especially in this country, there's just a big division. There's no compromise. It's, whether it's political, socially, economically, it just seems like there's a huge division, and it just keeps growing, and that's it.
Yes, definitely a strong concern. So, just listening to each other express these shared, deeply felt concerns. I imagine that many of us have at times in these times that we live in felt discouraged and daunted by our Bodhisattva vows. We vow to dispel all delusions, to enter all dharma gates, and to free all beings from suffering. As some of our Sangha members in making that commitment to receive the precepts say, I can't possibly take that on. It's so impossible. I am so inadequate. But the key here is not to see our Bodhisattva vows as an individual enterprise at which you must either succeed or fail in this little lifetime. I noticed in the generation, a couple generations younger than my own, that the ante is even up higher, that they feel that they should be successes, they should have a startup or a nonprofit to save the world by the time they're 35. And that's not how our Bodhisattva vows work. That is, if we approach them that way, we set ourselves up for frustration and disappointment and self-judgment. So here's where not only Vimalakirti, I want to insert a little bit. Our Sangha is halfway through our 8-week practice period that we do every fall, and our what we're practicing with this year is a koans from the Book of Serenity, which is a collection of koans from the Soto Zen tradition, even though they overlap a lot of koans in the Blue Cliff record and other collections. And there's one I just want to share with you. It's a dialogue, an old Zen story from China that comes to mind. And it goes like this. Dizang was working in the field when a monk came along, and Dizang asked him, "Where do you come from?" "From the south," the monk replied. "How is the Buddha Dharma in the south?" "It's being discussed all over," said the monk. How can that compare to me here planting the fields, growing food to eat? Dizang challenged the monk. But what about the world? The monk protested, and Jizang replied, what do you call the world? So this is a common question in the koan literature. Jizang asks the monk where he's from, and the monk makes the mistake of taking the bait, taking him literally, and replies from the south. He's assumed this division between the north and the south, which in those days was significant. There's a competition, a rivalry between north and south, like all those dichotomies that we habitually create. Soto Zen, Rinzai Zen, Republican and Democrat, black and white, rich and poor. Even to talk about taking our practice into the world, as we sometimes do, implies that there's an inside and an outside, a here and a there. But Dizang strings the monk along and he says, so how's the Buddha Dharma in the South? And the monk replies, it is widely discussed. That sounds like good news. But Dizang isn't going to let him get away with it. He says, how can all that discussion compare to me here planting the fields, growing food to eat? This reminds me of the great 8th century Chinese Layman Pang. Have you heard of him? Who wrote the poem, my daily activities are not unusual. I'm just naturally in harmony with them. Grasping nothing, discarding nothing. In every place, there's no hindrance, no conflict. My supernatural power and marvelous activity, drawing water and chopping wood. So that's where that phrase, chop wood, carry water, it's become a kind of Zen cliche almost, but that's where it came from, Layman Pang. So the monk protests, what about the world? Isn't there more to say or do than just plant the fields and make rice balls to eat? How can we save the world? We can identify with that the monk struggling, Isn't there more? Can't we do more? Isn't there more to do? We always feel that we can't do enough. But Dizang lobs the question right back to him. What do you call the world? Out there, elsewhere? If you think it's you saving the world, you've got it upside down. Those old Chinese Zen masters from the koan literature, the Tang Dynasty, they lived in extremely troubled times of civil war, famine, epidemic disease, social disorder, just like we do today. Of course, the stakes are higher yet today. There are many more of us in the world. But those old masters can still teach us a thing or two. So that's where I went in the article that I wrote, was to the Vimalakirti Sutra, because Vimalakirti, how many people are familiar with the Vimalakirti? Yeah, again, most of you, but not all. So the basic story in the Vimalakirti Sutra is Vimalakirti is lying in his sickbed, and the Buddha sends one bodhisattva after another, or tries to send one bodhisattva after another to visit Vimalakirti and inquire after his health. And one bodhisattva after another says, oh, no, I couldn't possibly, because once when I was out teaching the Dharma, Vimalakirti came along and completely showed me up with his wisdom. So I'd be too embarrassed to go. So one after another makes an excuse and gives Vimalakirti's teachings. Until finally Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, is persuaded to go. And when Manjushri asks Vimalakirti about his illness, he began just like we do, if we're visiting a friend who is ill. Just, how are you doing? How long have you been sick? What's the treatment? How's it going? What's the prognosis? But Vimalakirti gives an unexpected answer. He declares that his illness is born of human ignorance and craving, that he is ill because all beings are ill. When all beings are free from suffering, his illness will be healed. Because bodhisattvas enter this realm of birth and death, they suffer illness. So we all suffer the illness of the world right now, in various ways, varying degrees. So of course we feel the pain of the world. And as bodhisattvas, our commitment is not to turn away. So how do we do that? Manjushri asks Vimalakirti how a bodhisattva should regard living beings. And Vimalakirti says, as the wise view the moon in the water, or a face or form seen in a mirror, as shimmers of heat in a torrid season, as the echo that follows a cry, as clouds in the sky, as foam on the water, bubbles on the water, as a thing no firmer than the trunk of the plantain, no longer lasting than a flash of lightning. So Manjushri is puzzled, if we see living beings only as ephemeral, almost like nothing substantial. Manjushri says, if we regard living beings in this way, how can we treat them with loving kindness? How then can we care enough? I've been asked that question by Zen students who are parents. Am I supposed to be so non-attached that I don't care about my child? Vimalakirti teaches us how to care with the love of a bodhisattva. And this is what he says. Bodhisattva treats living beings with a love that never despairs. Seeing that all is empty and without ego, treats them with the love of bestowal of the dharma, never stinting in its gifts, treats them with the love of observance of the precepts, training those who break them to do better, treats them with the love of forbearance, guarding both others and self, treats them with the love of assiduousness. These are the paramitas. You recognize he's using, this translation is using slightly different words. I usually say patience. This is saying forbearance, with the love of assiduousness or diligence, shouldering all beings as its burdens, treats them with the love of meditation, unaffected by taste, treats them by the love of wisdom, which always knows the right time, treats them with the love of skillful means, with manifestations suited to every occasion, treats them with a love that hides nothing, proceeding with the purity of an upright mind, treats them with the love of a deeply searching mind, one free of irrelevant motion, treats them with a love that is unerring, innocent of falsity and sham, treats them with a love full of peace and delight. For through it they gain the delight of the Buddha, such is the love of a bodhisattva. I think that we could write that each in our own words to say this is how a bodhisattva cares for living beings, using the love that comes from each of those paramitas, each of those qualities. I just think that's such a beautiful passage. And the other passage in the Vimalakirti Sutra that I find so deeply moving is when Manjushri asks, how should a bodhisattva go about comforting and instructing another bodhisattva who is ill? And that might mean another bodhisattva who has long COVID, as one of our Sangha member has, or another bodhisattva who has experienced a deep loss, or another bodhisattva who has just tried so hard in climate change, climate crisis movement, and is feeling deeply discouraged. All these different ways that a bodhisattva might be discouraged. And this is what Vimalakirti says. Tell them about the impermanence of the body, but do not tell them to despise or turn away from the body. Tell them about the sufferings of the body, but do not tell them to strive for nirvana. Tell them that the body is without ego, but urge them to teach and guide living beings. Tell them of the emptiness of the body, but do not tell them of its final extinction. Tell them to repent of former offenses, but do not tell them to consign them to the past. Tell them to use their own illness as a means of finding compassion with the illness of others. Tell them to recall the good fortune that they have through their practice, have gained through their practice, to concentrate on a life of purity and not to give way to gloom or worry. Tell them to cultivate diligence to become the king of physicians. That's another way of saying a Buddha, who can heal the ailments of the assembly. This is how a bodhisattva should comfort and instruct a bodhisattva who is so ill as to make them feel unhappy. This is what we must do to be good bodhisattva companions to each other. Because we need good companions. We can't be bodhisattvas all by ourselves. In the essay, I quoted the American poet Adrien Rich, who wrote years ago, "My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who age after age perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world." That phrase, reconstitute the world, healing the world, that's an old Jewish or Hebrew saying, and I think tikkun. Does anyone know? I think tikkun is the word for that. So that is bodhisattva work, to heal the world. I think that's. Oh, maybe I'll just also say, that each of us will do that work in a different way. And I'm sure you've all seen images of the 1,000-armed Kannon Bodhisattva of compassion. Each arm holds a different tool, right? To meet a certain kind of suffering in the world. And so each of us are, one of those arms. And each hand has an eye to see. And of course, the Kanzeon, the name of Kannon Bodhisattva, is to hear the cries of the world. So each of us does that in our unique way, with our particular life that we've been given, our particular set of karmic obstructions that we practice to release. In these times, it's too easy to succumb to the bleak narratives of the news media, and to fail to see the courage and integrity and beauty with which people in our own communities, near and far, are working to reconstitute the world, because they don't make the headlines. So we have to make a special effort to find out and to, in whatever small ways, join with others. And we do this through the way of action and the way of non-action or stillness, with the wisdom to know when to act and speak and when to be still. I think we should never underestimate the gift that a quiet, calm mind in times of fear and struggle offers to those who are struggling and fearful. We are not helpless gods. We are humans embodied on and of this earth. And though we often don't believe it, we are never helpless. Our help lies in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And the numberless beings for and with whom we awaken. So I will stop and leave some time for any reflections people would like to share or questions.
Let me first thank you, Myoshin. That's just what some of us needed to hear, I think. I just want to remind folks, we have some folks watching one way at home. If you have a question, you can email me at jundotreeleaf@gmail.com. jundotreeleaf@gmail.com. That's one word. And I'll ask the question. We also had some questions from folks who could not be here tonight who sent them to me before. But anyone here have any question? And yeah, Dave.
Thank you, Myoshin. When I read your article, you talked about, we sometimes have this impulse to turn away out of fear from facing the challenges. And something that I've noticed in myself is I don't think it's the opposite in terms of the mind state, but the opposite in terms of the action, where I'll obsessively follow the information or pursue more information and just kind of dig and dig and dig. And when I do stop and look, it's from, I can tell myself a story that it's from a good place of like just wanting to inform myself, but a lot of times it's not. A lot of times it's coming from a place of maybe righteous anger or a place of imagining that if I know enough, I can kind of control the outcomes, or even a place of maybe wanting to feel superior to other people. And so during our practice period that we're doing here, the thing that I've given up is following the news, right? I kind of intentionally stepped back from that. And this has been kind of an interesting time to do that, honestly. But I guess I'm curious for your thoughts on finding that balance, right? Of not burying our head in the sand, but also not, because the reality is with technology, there's no end to the new sufferings I could find out about every minute, and they're true. And there's no, I could do that all day, every day. And it's like, so yeah, I'm curious how you find that balance. Thank you.
Thanks so much. That's a really important question, and something that I wanted to include, because I think that yes, we could be 24 hours a day saturating ourselves with information, and I really actually believe that distorts our view. It's that the media does not give us the whole picture. It's important to be informed, and I really suggest to people do not watch TV news before you go to bed. Our nervous systems were not built to take in that much trauma, and to choose to read maybe one in-depth article rather than a lot of little bits. To really kind of be somewhat disciplined about the way you take in information, and to balance it. I think it's very important that we nourish what brings us, that keeps us grounded, connected, and that opens to moments of joy. I don't know how I would have got through the pandemic without hummingbirds, because they just bring a smile, guaranteed. When they, we have to balance. We have to be good for the long haul, and to notice, like you said, where our care and interest is getting a little, contaminated by various, that sense of righteousness or strong agenda, and because then, then we sulk when it doesn't go the way we want, as fast as we want it to go. So to be good for the long haul, we have to, if you've done any practice with the Brahma Viharas, of course, there's loving kindness and compassion. Equanimity and joy have to come in as well. Yeah, I could say more about that, but I want other people to have a chance.
If I may read a question that was sent previously by Pim. Just to summarize, the kind of work they do, they feel it's important to keep motivated to be morally outraged, but they try not to fall into anger. And but they feel the moral outrage keeps them motivated to keep going day by day. Is it okay to be morally outraged? And how do you tell the difference between that and falling into anger?
Not so easy, is it? Yeah. In His Holiness the Dalai Lama, in the book about the afflictive emotions, that's not the title, but I'm sure some of you are familiar with that book. He just give me a moment. Sorry, I just had to ask for my door to be closed because my cat opened it. The Dala in Tibetan, apparently there is a distinction, 2 different words for those 2 kinds of anger. And the one that I prefer not to call moral outrage, I prefer to call it fierceness. Fierceness, because it is powered by deep care and deep clarity. And it's so most of what I see people calling moral outrage is contaminated by anger, is contaminated by our habits of ego-centered. And from that place, that rage comes the kind of animosity that we see so often expressed, and it doesn't change anybody's heart. So I think we have to be very, very careful when we engage that energy. And it does take firmness, and it does take a kind of fierceness. But we have to be careful, very self-aware in engaging that energy. That's I'm not saying that as well as I'd like to, but that's what I'm offering.
Mark?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on what Dave was saying. And it is these days with the technology and the sort of selfie activism that's developed in, through those technologies. What Dave, I so much have to figure out, am I being informed, or am I just taking a dog pile of opinions and trying to parse out what the little bit of truth might be in there or just what is a whole bunch of bumper stickers being thrown at me, or technically with just opinion. And anyway, I just wanted to share that. Thank you so much.
Yes, I think just voicing that that challenge is important to do. And that's one thing we can do. I remember one of our young Sangha members came to me and, really in great distress at the way her workplace had devolved into a very conflictual place. And this is like a worthy nonprofit workplace, and she's a young lawyer. And I said, that's really, and she was finding it very hard not to the pressure to take one or the other side. And I said, one thing you can do is bear witness to how painful this is, and to speak about how hard this is for you, and name it. And I think when we do that, it invites others to share their struggle. Yeah, we could also take a vacation from the opinion columns.
Anyone else? If I may, I'm going to, this is not a question that was asked for tonight, but I've been asked several times in the past months, 2 times theoretically. So some old soldiers came to me, one fellow just today, old Vietnam vet, and said, if I could, I would pick up a gun and go defend Israel. And then we have in our Sangha several members from Ukraine where this is not theoretical, and they actually are doing this. I've been asked, is it okay to feel such hate for the Russians for invading our country? And may I pick up a gun and go fight as a Buddhist? And I gave my response, but I would like to hear what you would say, Myoshin, in such cases. Are there times to go fight and kill?
I would say, and I haven't been asked that question, so I really appreciate your asking it, because it gives me the chance to think, what would I say? What would I say? I who left, who declared myself a pacifist in my teens and left the land of my birth, the United States, during the Vietnam War, so as not to support that war, which was a racist, brutal war. I don't think it's even possible to declare that one war is more just, a just war, and another is not. But if someone asked me that, I think I might say that I can't make that decision for you, because I am not in your shoes. And it's for you to deeply investigate and to deeply, in your deepest heart, investigate what you need to do to support your homeland and the Ukrainian people, or your Palestine or Israel, whichever. And know that if you choose violence, that there will be consequences. That violence breeds violence. And the Buddha taught that in one of the earliest teachings of the Buddhist teachings. And you would, so that you will take that on. And it's, as long as, along with the love of your people, of your homeland, you will take on that the perpetuation of hatred and violence. And know, it's that deep and old, and you are part of it. And it's this ancient human tragedy. Maybe I would say something like that. And I would say, I don't think we can just say as a Buddhist, that particularly as a Zen Buddhist, we don't get to say, you have to do this or you can't do that. As a Zen Buddhist, there's always a koan there. There's always somewhere you have to go deeper. You have to go deeper. Depending on how well I knew this person and what their practice. Right? I might say some of that.
Thank you. That was very helpful to me too. That's really, really a life and death question, and I really appreciate what you just said. We're coming, I guess, to the end of the evening or the morning, depending where you are. Anyone have anything more they'd like to ask? Anything on your heart? Now's your chance. Bjorn.
Okay, it's not a question, so I apologize if it's not properly formulated, but as I was reading your essay, Myoshin, I thought how wonderful it is that within our practice and our teachings, there is room for less than perfect bodhisattvas, less than perfect practice. It made me think of, I don't know if anybody knows it, but there's this sutra from the Tibetan canon, which is the Mahayana Sutra of Great Determination. And in that sutra, there's a little story about a group of 60 bodhisattvas that were in a really bad place. And Maitreya hears about them, goes to them and goes, what's going on? What's happening with you guys? And they go, oh, we're just destroyed. We're devastated. We're not feeling this. Something is wrong. We feel guilty. We feel stressed. And Maitreya goes, let us go to the Buddha. And when they go to the Buddha, instead of the Buddha going, you bad bodhisattvas, you did this, you'll be kicked out. What? There's a compassion there where the Buddha says, all right, let me tell you what's going on. So you went through this in a previous life. And now you're suffering this. So how are you fixing it? So anyway, by the end of the story, they realize that, it's the whole story behind what's going on with them and their discouragement. And they make all of these big commitments. And the Buddha goes, yes, that's good. That's what you need to do. And I think your article did the same. It showed the problem. You look at the pictures and you say, oh, this discourages me. This makes me feel awful. But then those same pictures point to the solution to it, which is don't focus on yourself. Focus on what you can do, what's doable, what's out there, what's, possible. Take yourself out a little bit of all of this, because that's the source of discouragement. That's what I got from it. And I thought it was a very encouraging aspect to say, stop. Let me focus on something else for a minute, someone else.
Thank you. I'd like to find that passage and that text. One of the great gifts that I found in our practice is a way to practice with endless human folly and, fallibility. And when we commit to the Bodhisattva precepts, failure is built in because we know how impossible, and yet we commit anyway over and over and over again. And I don't know the wording of your purification or repentance verse, but all our ancient twisted karma from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, born through body, speech, and mind, we together fully avow. And then, we see it as deeply and clearly as possible, and then we recommit we reset our compass over and over and over again. Because how can we be perfect in this world? How can an individual be perfect in a world with so much suffering? So it makes it possible for us to speak and act, even if we don't always get it completely right. Then we try again. So that's to me a huge gift, and it's more hopeful than if I blow it, I'll suffer eternal damnation. Right. So yeah, I hope all of you will take heart and join with others in whatever small ways.
I know the evening grows late, but we had one last question that came in that is really they're begging me to ask you, and I'm sorry I'm having trouble to read. What they asked is about something like survivor's guilt. They look at the things in the world, and it's not that they're just frustrated or angry. They really feel guilty for their comfortable life. They look at the people on the other side of the world, and they feel that they don't deserve their life. They don't deserve to be living in such circumstances when there are other people in the world who obviously tonight don't have a place to live. I think I'm sorry, but that was the question. Do you have anything about that?
I do. I think guilt has no place in our practice. I'm saying that with some fierceness. No guilt, but responsibility. Guilt is not I don't think guilt is what the Buddha taught. The Buddha said, you are as worthy as anyone of care and respect, no matter who or what you, who or where you are. And that kind of guilt is a hindrance. It keeps us from offering just what we can from where we are. So I think we have to recognize it as a hindrance. And there are many, many small choice points just in our daily lives. I think bringing it down to from the overwhelming to what can I do right, now, and who can help me and who can I help? We've all, many of us have been conditioned to that narrative of guilt. I think we have to recognize it as such, as conditioning, and practice the same kindness towards ourselves as we would accord to others. Yeah.
Well, unless anyone has anything really, really pressing, I'm going to just thank Myoshin for this gift to all of us. A lot of us, I really needed that. I think a lot of us do, because it's so discouraging just to see what's going to be in the news every morning. I hesitate before I check the CNN every morning or whatever it is, and but tomorrow I hope to see it with fresh eyes. I just want to say thank you, Myoshin. It was a great gift for being here. And I want to say Tsukuba, where I am, and your old stomping ground. Boy, you wouldn't recognize it in some ways, but I bet you parts of it hasn't changed very much since you've been here. And of course, Tsukuba Mountain looks just the same.
Yeah. And the tambo michi, the rice paddies are probably still there. Yeah.
They just harvested the rice a few weeks ago.
I can just picture it. Well, I hope I hope to get back to Japan in the next year or two.
Well, stop on by here. I got a room for you right here. You don't need a hotel if you come to scuba. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, so much for coming and for your participation and bringing your hearts.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and good morning, good evening, good night to all of you.
Good
See
morning,
you
good
later.
evening, good night.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.